Grace and peace to you from God our Father and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. My dad is stronger than your dad. My dad is smarter than your dad. My dad is cooler than your dad. When kids are young, and they are still in awe of their fathers, they make these kinds of assertions, challenging the kids around them. Doesn't matter who your dad is, my dad is better than your dad. And kids say those things, of course, because they still respect their fathers. They look up to their fathers. In their eyes, their dads can do no wrong. Of course, that doesn't last. Sooner or later, all children come to find out, to their horror and dismay, that their fathers filled with all kinds of faults. They might not be shocked about it, but they slowly come to the realization that their father isn't as strong or as smart or as cool as they thought he once was. It's a sad realization for these children. And if anyone would know his faults and flaws other than his wife, it would be his kids. On a day like Father's Day, you may call to mind some of the positive characteristics about your father, or maybe you would call to mind some of the not positive characteristics of your father, depending on who your dad was or is. And there's some good things about the one who fathered you, and there's some things that are not so good. Some commendable qualities, and then there are some personality traits that might not be so admirable. If you're over the age of 5 right now, you probably have a pretty good grasp on all of the shortcomings that your father has. And so on a day like today, on Father's Day, we are talking about God as our Father. In fact, by one count, he is called Father 255 times in the New Testament alone. It's one of his favorite names for himself to describe who he is and what he does. And so you take all those commendable qualities of fathers on this earth and you pile them together, and that's who God is, but of course so much more. Because he is your Father without fault or flaw or inconsistency. He is your Father without shortcomings. He always does what needs to be done. He always speaks in the kindest possible way. He always acts in a way that a mature Christian father should act. God is your Father, but he is a Father like no other. Already in our worship service, on those first 2 parts in the bulletin, we saw these 2 responsibilities of fathers. They are supposed to provide for their families, and they are to protect them. And usually most fathers in this world take those responsibilities very seriously. I know I do. I try to provide everything that my family needs, but sometimes I can't. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I want to, but I'm simply unaware of what they need or how to get it for them. But your perfect Heavenly Father provides you everything that you need every single time. And then he piles on top all of those extra blessings above and beyond what is necessary. Just look at the big picture for a second. Your Father has placed you on a planet that is tilted at just the right degree, with interconnecting ecosystems that can't really even be explained or duplicated, with a protective atmospheric layer, spinning at just the right rate, and orbiting on just the right path so it creates all these seasons and climates that are perfectly designed for our survival. Not just for our survival, but the Lord gives us plenty of opportunities to actually enjoy it. Our Father could have just been a practical God and nothing else. Which means that He would just give us the basic elements of survival in this life and allow us to subsist on nothing but the essentials. But our Father is not just a practical God. He is an extremely, overly generous God. Think about the myriad of colors that take our breath away in this world. Think about the musical sounds that move our hearts. Think about the aromas and the flavors that we start to crave. The emotions that build up inside and give us so much joy. The warmth of friendship. The pleasure of an accomplishment. The peace of silence. We could go on and on and on. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions upon millions of blessings, both big and small, that the Lord pours out on you every single day of your life, whether you ask for them or not, whether you think about them or not, whether you know about them or not, and all of them He's not obligated to give you. God is our Father, but He is a Father like no other. And He also protects us like no other father does. As a father, I certainly try to protect my children and have them buckle up when they get in the car. Look both ways before they cross the road. I train them to be safe. I teach them about the dangers all around them. I warn them about those people or situations that could harm them in the future. But those are really just precautionary measures, aren't they? In the end, I'm just trying to minimize the damage if something bad would occur, because I can't stop it. I don't have the power to prevent bad things from happening. And I certainly don't have the wisdom or the insight to take those things and use them for their benefit either. But God, your Father, can. God, your perfect Heavenly Father, shields you from everything that would completely destroy our faith. God, your Heavenly Father, shelters you from the majority of the incessant attacks that the devil continues to throw at you. God, your Father, continues to defend you kind of behind the scenes without you even knowing about it. And so the things that would harm your body and your soul don't even touch you. And at those times when He does allow evil to touch your life, in those moments when He lets you go through the painful and the unpleasant, He gives you His promise that He will use even those awful circumstances in this life to carry out His good and perfect will for you. God, our Heavenly Father, can protect you from everything. And even when He doesn't, He says that's going to be for your good. God truly is your Father like no other. But out of all the characteristics of our Father that kind of set Him apart, out of all the qualities that we praise and thank Him for, there are two that stand out above them all. That's part 3 of our worship service. His love and His compassion. King David understood this from experience. And so when he sat down to write what we now call Psalm 103, and he compares our Heavenly Father with earthly fathers, he highlights His love and compassion above everything else. You have that in your bulletin if you want to follow along from Psalm 103. David writes, "As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear Him. For He knows how we are formed. He remembers that we are dust. As for man, his days are like grass. He flourishes like a flower of the field. The wind blows over it, and it is gone, and its place remembers it no more. But from everlasting to everlasting. The Lord's love is with those who fear him, and his righteousness with their children's children. Compassion. That means there's a person up here and a person down here. And the person down here is hopeless, powerless, defenseless. Compassion means that that person up here must be moved enough to have mercy. Must have a heart that aches enough to want to help the helpless. That person up here must care enough to want to do something about it, even though this person might not have any obligation in the world to do so. Compassion is that part of love that bends down and rescues the desperate and the helpless and the hopeless without wanting anything in return. As a father has compassion on his children, David wrote, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. That's who our God is, a father of compassion. But he has to have compassion on us more than a father has compassion on his children. A father has that ingrained responsibility to have compassion on his children, but even then it doesn't work sometimes. Even then a father's compassion is too harsh, too rigid, too rough. Not your Lord's. And it's a good thing because David reminds us that we are only dust when we are compared to our God. That means we are insignificant. We are trivial. We are altogether unimportant compared to the Almighty Lord. And compared to the Creator of this universe. Who are we? Compared to the Creator of this universe, why would the Lord pay any attention? Who am I that I would take up even a second of his time? Who am I that he would spend even an ounce of his effort looking after me? Who am I that he would even notice me? I'm just a small fleck of ash being blown through the wind compared to my God. And not only am I a small fleck of ash floating through the wind, I'm a sin-filled small fleck of ash floating through the wind. And so I do things that are completely contrary to God's will. And would get in the way of God's will if in fact he had not planned ahead already. I act in ways that would hold back God's plans if in fact he had not put multiple things into motion to make sure that what he wanted happened anyway. I'm always getting in his way. I'm always doing things opposite of what he wants. I am always seemingly throwing a wrench into his divine intentions and his promised purposes. And so why would the Lord himself ever bother with me except to brush me off to the side? Why would he ever listen to anything I wanted to say? Why would the Lord Almighty care? Compassion. That's why. The Lord is a Father of compassion. And it's not just compassion itself, it's love. A love that is so full. A love that is so immense that it can't even be described. And so when David writes this psalm in Psalm 103, he has to kind of compare it to what happens here. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. And fearing God doesn't mean to be afraid of him. It means to have so much awe and respect of the Lord that you step back and don't want to do anything else but worship him. I think of this word fear, this awe and respect of something so immense when I'm standing in the Black Canyon. Or when I'm standing in the middle of any one of these massive topographical formations in this part of the country. It's so big, it's so vast, it's so deep, it's so immense that your mind tells you that you need to step back a little bit because your depth perception is skewed. Your brain just can't wrap your mind around the height and the distance and the mass of what's in front of you. You're almost overwhelmed by the majesty of it all. That's fear. Fear of our Father. We are overwhelmed by the majesty of Him. His magnificence is too great to fathom. His grandeur is too incredible to really grasp correctly. And so we back up, and we bow down, we fold our hands, we drop to our knees, and we hold our breath because we can't find the words to say. God is our Father, but He is our Father like no other. That might be hard for some of us to grasp, to comprehend, to really apply to our lives because some of us didn't have the greatest of fathers. Some of us did not grow up with a father that provided and protected and loved and had compassion. And even if you did have that kind of father because the Lord blessed you with that family, you see it all the time in this world. Whether it's on the news, or your friends, or in real life. Fathers that abandon their children. Fathers that take their anger out on their children. Fathers that put their children in harm's way. And our stomach turns, doesn't it? We hate that. We despise when fathers are not acting like fathers, but just the opposite. Here's the irony. That is exactly why we praise our Father the most. Because He abandoned His Son. He took His anger out on His Son. He put His own Son in harm's way. That's why we praise our Heavenly Father. That's why He is so loving and compassionate. Because He abandoned His own Son on a cross so that He could hold you in His arms. God, your perfect Heavenly Father, was willing to unload His full wrath and anger on His Son so that you didn't have to feel a drop of it. Our Heavenly Father's love and compassion ran so deep that He was willing to put His own perfect Son in harm's way and then leave Him there to suffer hell and then to bleed out on that cross so that He could save your soul. And then your perfect Heavenly Father bent down and he scooped you out of the dust that you are and formed you into a member of His family, made you His child through the gift of faith in Jesus as your Savior, and promised you that you would always live with Him in His heavenly home. That's what a Father does. That's the love and passion that your Father has for you. He is a Father like no other. And that love for you that He showed back then is the love for you that He shows now, and that love is never going to end. That's what David says in that song, isn't it? From everlasting to everlasting is the Lord's love for those who fear Him, and His righteousness for their children's children. The dependability and the reliability of God's love is just as amazing to me as the reasons for it. It perplexes me how that can happen because I don't know that kind of love. I've never shown that kind of love. I certainly love my children as their father, but a father's love ebbs and flows. A father's love is up and down. A father's love is strong, but then it's weak. It is sincere, and then it's superficial. It is completely dedicated one moment, and then pitifully absent the next. Not the love of your Father. The love of your Father never wavers. It never fades. It never stops. From everlasting to everlasting is the Lord's love for you. That means He loved you before you existed. He loved you before anything existed, and His love for you will still be just as strong and just as powerful and just as pure billions and billions of years from now when you are still enjoying the pleasures of paradise in your Father's presence. His love for you will never grow old. Instead, it will continue to grow exponentially every minute He spends with you. Who else loves you like that? Who else has compassion on you like that? Who else protects and provides and cares for you like that? And who else can guarantee that this is the way it will always be? Not your spouse, not your children, not the best of friends, not your mother, not even your father on Father's Day. Only your perfect Heavenly Father loves you like that. Because you have a Father like no other.